Now, alhamdulillah, so we are on the chapter in relation to, or pertaining to the Wudhoo. So this is the next chapter that we're going on to now, the chapter of Wudhoo, Bab al-Wudhoo. And Ibn Qudamah rahimahullah, he begins by mentioning لا يصح الوضوء ولا غيره من العبادات إلا أن ينويه لقول رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إنما أعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى. And so, as we understand from any action of ibadah, that it cannot be accepted, an action of ibadah cannot be accepted except that they have a correct intention. They have the correct intention. And this is due to the hadith narrated by Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, where he mentions إِنَّمَا أَعْمَالَ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, indeed actions are by their intentions, and that everyone shall gain or shall attain that which they intend. And so this is the first mentioning of this affair of the wudhu. And no doubt when we understand the wudhu as well, that wudhu is a shart, is a condition لصحة الصلاة, is a condition for the salah. And this is understood by way of the ayah first and foremost in Surah Al-Ma'idah, where Allah Ta'ala states, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا كُمْتُمْ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ. And so the ayah mentioned, oh, you believe, if you come to stand in the salah and to perform the salah, then wash your faces, and then your hands or your arms, wipe over your heads, and then wash your arms up to your elbows, wipe over your heads, and wash your feet up until the Ka'bayn, and the ankles. And so this ayah is a proof that the wudhu is a shart li-sihhat as-salah. The wudhu is a condition for the salah to be correct and valid. Likewise, you have the hadith in which it mentions لا تصح الصلاة إلا بالوضوء, that a salah is not valid except with wudu. This hadith as well is also an indication of the affair of the salah itself, and the fact that it's a condition that the person has wudu when performing the salah. And when we understand from these nusus, from these two texts, or the texts such as these, pertaining to tahara and the like of that, is that we understand from it is that we have the obligation of wudu. And that's the fa'idah mantuqa. The benefit which has been mentioned directly is the obligation of wudu. And as for the fa'idah, so we have the fa'idah mantuqa and the fa'idah mafhuma. So that which has been directly mentioned is the obligation of wudu. That which is mafhum as well, that which is understood, the second benefit you can mention from them, is that the wujub, the obligation of wudu, is for the one that intends to establish the salah. And so for the one that intends to pray. Why? Because the salah is not accepted unless there is tahara. And so the obligation of wudu, the obligation of a person performing the wudu, is at the time of the hadath. Is in a scenario where there's a hadath, and the person has impurity. When we mention al-hadath, we mean al-hadath al-asghar, the minor impurity, and not the major. To the minor impurity, then no doubt the wudhu is required. And thereafter, as we mentioned, Ibn Qudama, he mentions, نعم ولا يصح الوضوء ولا غيره من العبادات إلا عن ينوي. And so the wudu or anything other than that is not regarded as being correct until the person, or unless the person intends it. And so everyone has to have an intention. And this is the case with all the ibadat. That everything goes back to your intention. For example, the salawat. The salah, the person has to have the intention of praying the salah when establishing the salah. Or, for example, when they're praying the salah, they have to have the intention of praying that particular salah as well. For example, if the person, he comes to the masjid, مثلا, and he begins the salah, and he has the intention of praying the nafilah, and then he finds that a person has come to join him in salah. He becomes aware that people are joining him in salah. People, 1, 2 people, 2, 3 more people, for example, are now praying behind him, and it's a jama'ah. At that point, is he able to change his intention for it to be salah which is from the fara'id, or salah farida? The question clear? Is he able to do so?
Yeah, you have to do the other part. Yeah.
Some say yes, some say no. Inshallah. هكذا. If you say yes, why say yes? If you say no, why say no?
There's a narration of a companion who used to pray Isha, I think with the Prophet.
So,
Yeah, I think it was Muhammad. And then after that, he would go and lead the people in prayer.
Okay.
For him, he was nafila, but for the people, obviously, it was
the obligation. So then you're saying, so what's your answer then?
So the answer is, he's not allowed to change his intention, but the people behind him have a different intention.
Okay, but he's not allowed to change. You're saying he's not allowed to change his intention. People behind him have a different intention. Like the one that the ma'mum can have a different intention from the imam, is what you're saying. No. Okay, the ma'mum can have a different intention from the imam. But we're talking about the imam in this case. And you're saying he can't change his intention.
Not in that particular scenario, to change it from so for example, Fajr,
You can't change it from a nafila to a wajib, okay?
You can change it because of the when Prophet ﷺ used to hear babies crying and he used to pray quickly, finishes salah quickly.
But he's still praying the same salah though.
When you stop.
So the narration you mentioned where the Nabi alayhi salatu wasallam would hear the child crying, and so he would end the salah or not elongate the salah longer. This isn't a change of intention though. There's nothing that's changed. He still intended to pray that particular salah. The intention hasn't changed. No. So you're saying if it was wajib, you would change it to a nafila.
I would say the opposite.
And you would say the opposite. If you're saying if it's a nafila, you would say it's a wajib. Okay.
not from nafila to wajib, but from wajib to nafila.
You're saying yes. You changed your kalam.
No. So from the optional to a specific
Yes.
obligatory prayer, that's not allowed.
Okay.
And if it was the other way around,
If it was the other way around.
let's say like he wanted to change it from dhuhr and he wanted to pray, make it optional.
No.
Pray dhuhr later on with the imam, then that's allowed.
Then that's allowed. Allah knows best. But a movement we would say that the intention cannot be changed once the person has begun that salah. So any time after the takbiratul ihram, after the person made takbir to ihram, then the person cannot change that intention. Hence why the importance of mentioning the intention here. We mentioned the intention because everything is built upon the intention. So the person's intended to pray a particular salah and he's begun that salah. Na'am. And intention as well, if we're talking about the salah, in hayf al-ahkam in relation to these rulings, then is the intention, is it a condition, a pillar, or a wajib, or sunnah? The intention. It's a wajib. A shart, a condition, he's saying. Now it's a condition. So if it's a condition, then what did we say in relation to the definition of a condition? The condition has to be present when?
From beginning to end.
From beginning to end. Now. So if you have the intention, then that intention has to be present from beginning to end. Now, at a particular intention. So it's not a case that a person can say, or suffice to say that they're praying a salah and have the intention to pray a salah. No doubt a person has to have the intention to pray the salah, whichever particular salah they're praying. And so this is what we discussed previously. Now, is that clear? Barakallahu feekum. So this is what was mentioned in relation to the intention. And no doubt wudhu is the same. Like the person, mathalan, he was to wash his face, wash his arms, wipe over his head, and wash his feet, but he had no intention of purifying himself, yani wudu'an. He had no intention of purifying himself as an action of wudu. Then is this wudu? La. This is not wudu. Because it was devoid of the intention, didn't have the intention. طيب. Thereafter, Ibn Qudamah mentioned, ثم يقول بسم الله. ثم يقول بسم الله. Then after that, the person mentions the basmala. And within this discussion, you have those that mention that the basmala is a wajibah, is an obligation. And those from Ahlul Ilm that mention that it is sunnah, natural sunnah. It's not an obligation. And Shaykh Ubayd rahimahullah, he mentions in relation to the basmala that it is an obligation. And he mentions as a proof the hadith, the Hasan hadith, قول النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام لا صلاة لمن لا وضوء له ولا وضوء لمن لم يذكر اسم الله عليه. So he mentions there's no salah for the one that does not have wudu, and there's no wudu for the one that does not mention the name of Allah upon it, i.e. the basmala beforehand. And so, what we understood from this, and what the Shaykh mentions, rahimahullah, is that this is an obligation due to that. There's an obligation due to that. And he makes a distinction, rahimahullah, he mentioned that it's an obligation لِلَّذِي يَذْكُرُ. So it's an obligation for the one that remembers to make the basmala. So the one that is aware and he makes the basmala, then it is an obligation upon them to mention the basmala. It's an obligation upon them. So the one that remembers. Now, as for the one that does not remember, then this obligation, يسقط عنه. This obligation is removed from him. It's not something which is held against him. It's not regarded as being the wudu, which is invalid. However, if a person remembers to mention the basmala at any point, then they need to mention it. So even if they're in the middle of the wudu, as mentioned by the Shaykh rahimahullah, even if they're in the middle of the wudu, then they should mention the basmala. So no doubt the best time to mention the Basmala and the time which is in accordance with the Sunnah is that you mention the Basmala when? At the beginning. Naam, at the beginning. However, if the person for whatever reason forgets at the beginning, however, they're in the middle of the wudu, in the midst of the wudu, and then they remember, then upon them at that point is that they should mention the Basmala.
No Bismillah.
So, Bismillah.
Just Bismillah.
No. And thereafter, Shaykh mentions also, rahmahullah, as for the one that leaves it out amdan, so he leaves out the basmala, yani deliberately, then he says it's possible that this person's wudu is not valid. Why? Due to the wording of the hadith. And the wording of the hadith is wadih. The wording of the hadith is quite straightforward and quite clear. That there is no salah for the one that doesn't have wudu. There's no wudu for the one that does not mention the name of Allah. And so, this is what is mentioned thereafter. Then Ibn Khudama, he mentions, وَيَغْسِلُ كَفَّيْهِ ثَلَاثًا ثُمَّ يَتَمَضْمَضُ وَيَسْتَنْشِقُ ثَلَاثًا يَجْمَعُ بَيْنَهُمَا بِغَرْفَةٍ أو ثَلَاثٍ ثم يغسل وجهه ثلاثا من منابت شعر الرأس إلى ما انحدر من اللحيين والذقن وإلى أصل الأذنين ويخلل لحيته إن كانت كثيفة وإن كانت تصف البشرة لزمه غسلها ثم يغسل يديه إلى مرفقين ثلاث ويدخلهما في غسل ثم يمسح رأسه مع الأذنين يبدأ بيده من مقدمه ثم يمرهما إلى قفاه ثم يردهما إلى مقدمه ثم يغسل رجليه إلى الكعبين ثلاثا ويدخلهما في الغسل ويخلل أصابعهما ثم يرفع نظره إلى السماء فيقول أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. And so here, Qudama, he's mentioning the sifa, a discussion on the description of the wudu itself. The description of the wudu. And so he mentions first and foremost the washing of the hands, the hands up until the wrists. So washing of the hands 3 times. And he mentions this, and this is an action which is found to be from the sunnah of the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam. Naam. And from what's apparent, the narrations mention the washing of the hands 3 times. At each narration that mentions the washing of the hands up until the wrist, it mentions the three times. Naam. And Shaykh Ubayd, he mentioned that there's from what's apparent, there's no narration that mentions anything less than 3. So each time the person washes their hands before the wudu, that it should be washed 3 times. And this is an action which is in accordance with the sunnah. It's a sunnah. Naam, and not regarded as being from the wajibat. Thereafter, it mentions ثم يتمضمض ويستنشق ثلاثا. And thereafter the person makes the madmada or istinshaq. They make this madmada or istinshaq 3 times. But the madmada or istinshaq 3 times. But it's sufficient to do once. So once for sa'idan, so once or anything up until 3. And then the madmada, what is understood from the definition of madmada is the tahriq al-ma' fil fam. So the madmada is the gargling and the movement of the water in the mouth. That's the madmada. And the istinshaq is the jadfu ma' i.e. the pulling of the water and inhaling of the water into the nose. And we'll go on to mention further how it should be done, and as mentioned, it should be done with what is referred to as mubalagha, i.e. large amounts, except for the one that is saim, except for the one that is fasting. And so this is the madmada wastinshaq. Now, the madmada wastinshaq, it can be done separately, or it can be done with one intake of water. So the intake of water into the mouth and the nose, ma'an, yani together. So a person could, when performing the madmada istinshaq, they could put the water in the mouth, gargle the water in the mouth, expel the water, and then take the water into the nose, expel the water from the nose. They could do it like that. Or they can do it in one action, where they take the water, enter into the mouth and the nose, ma'an, together. And then expel it together as well. So this is correct and that is correct. Shaykh Ubayd, rahimahullah, he mentions that the madmada wastinshaq, it can be done in 3 ways. There's 3 ways that has been narrated that it has been done. 3 ways. Does anyone know what they are?
Gargling.
No, 3 ways. No, the gargling.
3 ways. No.
No, 3 ways.
Both of them. Not my
No.
together. That's one.
But I'm talking about them together. Even regardless of whether you do it, whether you do it together or one, or you do it separately, there's 3 ways it can be done. And where there's narrations for each of the 3. So, I'll put it out here basically. The first way, as mentioned, is that it could be done before the washing of the face. This is what is ma'ruf. The second is that it can be done, take a while, after the washing of the face. Naam. And the third way is what then? After the hands. After the hands. I washing of the arms. The dhra'i. So you have one which is before the washing of the face, is done. Second, after the washing of the face. And then the third, after the washing of the hands, after the washing of the arms. Now, these are the 3 ways that I mentioned for the madmada wa istinshaq. And the 3 ways in order to perform this particular ghusl. And thereafter it mentions that the washing of the face is then done, and this can be done 3 times from the roots of the hair, so the beginning of the hair. And inclusive of the lihya, and at the beginning parts of the ears as well. So including the whole face from the root, from the beginning of the hair. Now inclusive of the lihya, the beard, and on the sides, the ears, the beginning of the ears. So here, Ibn Qudamah rahimahullah, he's mentioned what constitutes the face from each direction. So from the uppermost part, from the beginning of the hair. From the lowermost part, inclusive of the beard. And on the sides, from the beginnings of anything parallel to the beginning of the ears. So he's mentioned from each of those directions. That this is what is inclusive of the face. And thereafter it mentions either takhleel, either washing or putting the fingers through the beard as well. This is inclusive of the beard and how a person is expected to wash the face. How a person is expected to wash the face. thereafter it mentions the ghusl or the yaday ila al-mirfaqayn. Thereafter you have washing the arms up to the elbows. So, and this is based upon the ayah where Allah Ta'ala mentions وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ. And so, based upon this, no doubt, it's an obligation to wash the arms as well. It's an obligation. And so, this is a clear distinction that is made between the washing of the hands at the beginning and washing of the arms, or the hands inclusive of the arms, in the wudhoo. Because the washing of the hands is an action of sunnah, mustahabba. The washing of the hands at the beginning. Whilst the washing of the hands inclusive of the arms to the elbows is from the wajibat. It's an obligation. It's an obligatory act. And this is due to what is mentioned within the ayah. And thereafter we understand as well that this word ila in the ayah, the word ila, is what is referred to as ma'iyah. So the ila is ma'iyah, inclusive of. So when the ayah mentions ila al-marafiqi, then it doesn't mean up until the elbow, but up to the elbow, yani inclusive of the elbow. So the washing ila al-marafiqi, yani to and including the elbow. And so when a person is washing the arm, then they wash the arm and it includes the elbow with that. And so it's not a tafsir, or it's not the meaning of al-ghusl yani ila ghaya yani. So just literally up until, not including. Naam, rather it's inclusive of that. And so those that from Ahlul Ilm that mention the tafsir of this ayah and mention this particular word ila within the ayah, the tafsir of it, meaning yani inclusive of, then of course when they discuss the sifatul wudhoo, when they discuss the description of the wudhoo itself, then they will include the elbow in that. And you have to wash the elbow along with that. And Allah Ta'ala knows best, but this is the stronger of the opinions in relation to that. And thereafter it mentions ثُمَّ يَمْسَحْ رَأْسَهُ مَا الْأُذْنَيْنِ. And thereafter the person wipes over the head with the ears, or wiping the ears. And this is due to the ayah as mentioned in the same ayah, or it's due to the part of the ayah. But Allah Ta'ala states, وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ. And so wipe over the heads. And this is something which is mentioned from the action of the Prophet ﷺ in the hadith of Abdullah ibn Zayd, that he would wipe over the head from using the two hands. Naam. And he would begin with the front part of the head and go towards the back. And then return back to the front part of the head. And so this narration, or this affair of the wiping over the head, what we understand from it as well is two particular affairs. The first of these two things is that in the manner in which the water is wiped over the head, then it is wiped over by way of what is referred to as the fadl al-ma. The fadl al-ma' extra water. So anything which is leftover water from. So the person, for example, they perform in the wudu, and then they have water left over from when they were doing the washing of the arms. The arms, so then within this action, then they should wipe over the head using what is left over from that water, from that previous action. And this is the first thing. The second is as mentioned within this narration. Also, you have the narration of Zayd ibn Asim, where you find the mention of the kayfiyatul mas, the understanding of the manner in which the mas, the wiping is done. Why? Because what we understand from this, barakallahu fikum, is that the ayah is amma. It gives a general description or general command to wipe over the head. Like if you stand in the salah, na'am, the person is to wash the face, wash the arms, and wipe over the head. In terms of the wiping over the head, then the tafsir and the detail comes within the narrations. And narrations such as these. That the detail comes when it comes to the narrations such as these, and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. And no doubt we understand that the hadith and ahadith are a means of tafsir for the ayat of the Quran in general. And so this is a clear indication of that, an example and an example of that. And so the Sunnah tabayyin and the Quran. And likewise as well, within this affair of the wiping, then it's authenticated from the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam that the udhunayn, the two ears, are regarded as being from the ras, as regarded as being from the head. And so once the person has done the mash, the wiping over the head, then upon them is to do the entering the fingers into the ears and wiping over the backs of the ears as well. And this is what is found within the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Thereafter, we have the mentioning of the ghusl al-rijlay ila al-ka'bayn, washing the feet up until the ankles. Again, this is taken from the same ayah, and his reason and his obligation is taken from the same ayah. وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ, the washing of the feet to the ka'bayn, to the up to the ankles. And this is something which, again, is found within the Sunnah of Nabi alayhi salatu wassalam, as well as the action after that, which is the placing the fingers between the toes, or the small finger between the toes to wash the feet. And this was due to the narration where the Nabi alayhi salatu wassalam states, أَسْبِغُ الْوُضُوء وَخَلِّ الْأَصَابِعِ. And so seek to complete the wudu in the best way possible and wash between the toes. So, a question that I believe I've asked in a previous lesson at some point, somewhere, I don't know when, but I believe I've asked the question, but I'll ask it again anyway, inshallah. You have the ayah, which we mentioned, and which a lot of these sifat are based upon. The ayah in Surah Al-Ma'idah, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا كُنتُمْ مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ. So the ayah mentions, first and foremost, all you believe, if you come to stand in the prayer, wash your faces and your hands, or your arms, wipe over your heads, wash your feet. The ayah, for those that have some awareness of the Arabic language or nahu, the ayah mentions يعني فاغسلوا وجوهكم. وجوهكم was a fatha on the ha. As مفعول به. This is what has to be washed. وأيديكم. Again, أيديكم fatha on the أيديكم, the ya. Because it's مفعول به, referring back to the ghusl. This is what has to be washed. Thereafter, Allah Ta'ala mentions وَامْسُهُ بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ. I go to the ba. The scene takes a kasra because the ba harf al-jar. بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ. Thereafter it mentions وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ. Again, fatha, because it's referring back to the ghusl. Fatha. However, you find there's a qira'ah which is mu'tabara, and it mentions وَامْسَهُ بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلِكُمْ. So now the fatha that was there before is not a fatha, it's rather as a kasra. So what we'd understand from this is wipe over the heads and the feet. Is that clear? So then in a particular qira'ah, they say wipe over the heads and wipe over the feet. How do we understand this particular qira'ah, let's say? How do we understand it? Because the ayah is mentioned wipe over the feet. Now, essentially, one answer is that it's referring to wiping over the socks. Because any wiping that a person does in terms of the feet is over the socks. That's one thing. Secondly, if you look at the narrations of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there's no narration that ever mentions that he, in his wudu, wiped over the feet. Now, so we know that, let's say at the starting point, we know there's no narration which verifies that he, alayhi salatu wasalam, wiped over the feet in his wudu. So if you understand that he did not wipe over the feet in the wudu, then it would beg the question, what does it mean by wiping over the feet? As the brother mentions, Allah khair, it's referring to the socks. Because this is what is affirmed within the sunnah. Either wiping over the socks. So, even though we have this qira'ah, this particular qira'ah, that is not referring to actually wiping over the foot, without anything else or anything upon it, which is claimed by the Rafida and others. Wallahu musta'an. And this is the rest of our relation to wiping over the feet. Thereafter, Ibn Qudami mentions ثم يرفع نظره إلى السماء فيقول أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. And so thereafter it mentions he looks towards the sky and states the shahada أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. And the reality is the first part of this speech of Ibn Qudama, where Ibn Qudama mentioned that the person looks towards the sky. The first part of this speech is da'if, wallahu a'lam. It's based upon a hadith which is da'if. And so there's nothing which is authenticated that the person looks towards the sky when completing the wudhu. Rather, that which is authentic is the statement of the shahada. This is based on the hadith on the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, من تودع فأحسن الوضوء ثم قال أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله فتح الله له أبواب الجنة 8 يدخل من أيها شاء. And so, what we understand from that is that, or what the narration mentions is that whoever performs the wudu and perfects their wudu, and thereafter they state, أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. نعم. Thereafter, the doors, Allah Ta'ala will open all 8 doors of Jannah for the individual. and he can enter into any which one of them which he wishes. And so this, no doubt, is the reward attached to the one that states the shahada after performing wudhu. So, just to be clear, that looking towards the sky after performing the wudu, then this isn't something which is authentic. It's not authentic. However, the shahada is authentic, and that narration is found in Sahih Muslim. So it states in the shahada afterwards, and that the doors, all 8 doors will generally be opened up to the individual, then this is something which is authenticated. And Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala knows best. And inshallah we'll conclude here for this lesson. And this will be the last lesson, or there won't be another lesson for maybe 2 more weeks, I believe. So not next week, not the week after that we'll continue, inshallah. And we'll continue with the discussion around the wudu and the chapters pertaining to the wudu. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam, jazakumullah khaira wa barakallahu feekum wa sallallahu wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. No.
The matter of the beard, the one who has a big beard as opposed to the one who has a small beard, how should he do it?
How should he do it? The one that has the big beard as in relation to in comparison to the one that has a small beard. The affair of the takhleel al-lihya, no doubt, is referring to one that has maybe a bigger beard, so that they run the fingers through the beard. If the person, and the reason for that is to try to ensure that the water reaches each part of the beard when performing the wudu. So now, if the person doesn't have a beard where they can run the finger through it, for example, then they still try to ensure that the water reaches each part of that beard. And so if they've done that, then this suffices, inshallah. And it's not necessarily that they have to try to find somewhere they can run their fingers through the beard, my friend. Rather, the main thing is that the intent behind that, the maqsood, is that the water reaches each part of the beard. Wallah. No.
Which is 235. اللهم اجعلني من التوابين واجعلني من المطهرين. ومن الحديث الثاني زادته اللهم استغفر واتوب اليك.
نعم in Sunnah Tirmidhi.
نعم زادته الله اعلم.
جزاكم الله خير. بارك الله فيك.
وصححه الألباني.
صححه الألباني.
نعم.
يكون موجود إن شاء الله.
عندي.
جزاكم الله خير.
والثاني أنا عندي مشكلة في أذن ما أقدر يعني أحطه يعني يدي في أذني. هل يسقط عليه هذا الشرط؟
الذي لا يستطيع أن if you're able to.
لا إذا دخل المي في أذني.
نعم.
يزيد
المرض. في هذه الحالة إذا لا تستطيع أن تدخل الماء فيه أو فيه عفوا عليك بالأعمال الأخرى، يعني جميع الأعمال إلا هذا. نعم إلا هذا، والله أعلم. هذا الذي يظهر، لأن
حتى ولو قطع يدخل.
نعم.
يزيد الالتهاب.
في التهاب.
نعم.
نعم. فهذا يعني الرجل مثل هذا يكون معذور بإذن الله، لأن هذا يزيده في ضرر. نعم والأذى. فإذا كان الأمر هكذا فلا بأس إن شاء الله يعني يتوضأ بجميع الأعمال الأخرى ويترك هذا ويتركه.
من له ولكن
أيوة يكون يعني على الخارج. نعم يمسح الخارج ولا يدخل الماء في يعني في الداخل. والله بارك الله فيك. not because of the affair of mubalagha or the using large amounts of water up the nose. This is something which is an action of sunnah, and it's not something which is an obligation. And so in this scenario, hence why it's also it mentions the narration that the person should put large amounts of water in the nose, except for when they're fasting. So there's an exception already now when a person is signed. But now if the person, due to something else in terms of medical needs or some other need, then they can, make sure the water reaches there, but not go into large amounts. No, but the brother mentioned in his case that one drop from that might increase it. So that's a big difference. Wallah. No. Allah. No.
Not a question, but more of a clarification, since I'm almost in the lesson when I said it, and hopefully it kind of clarified it too.
Yeah, no.
Last lesson for those that wasn't here, I kind of mentioned that I mentioned specifically that the scholar said that one of the benefits is that if there was stuff in the toilet area, with your left foot, and if you pass away, you would go backwards, and if there was a step out with the, I was getting confused with this, I think there's a step out with the right foot,
If you just step in first with the right foot, then you'd fall into it. Yeah.
I was looking into that and I can't hear a bit more, so no evidence from that part until I get clarification from the individual I heard it from.
Inshallah.
For the meantime, I had to take it.
Allah, also as well, Allah knows best, but everyone's different. So even if I understood what you mentioned, if the person will fall with their right foot, they may fall forwards because they're right-footed. So they're on their stronger foot, and then that becomes weak, and they fall forward. But not everyone's right-footed. Some people are left-footed. Never heard of the left wingers. So Allah. No. If you do find anything though, benefit us inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Barakallahu feekum. Sallallahu wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Barakallahu feekum wa jazakumullah khairan.